Have you ever wondered if the people we lose could somehow return to us? Not as memories, not as dreams, but as living, breathing souls, reborn into new bodies. And what if this didn't happen to just one person? What if an entire community experienced it together? On Thailand's southern coast, in a quiet fishing village, something seemingly impossible occurred. In a single tragic moment, 30 lives were lost beneath the waves, and years later, those lives appeared to return. Children began to be born in the same village, children who remembered drowning, children who feared water without knowing why, children who spoke of things no child should ever know. This is not a legend, it is not folklore. It is one of the most extraordinary documented cases of mass reincarnation ever recorded. The year was 1970. Thailand was a very different country then, quieter, less touched by the modern world. In the southern province of Phang, surrounded by limestone cliffs and turquoise waters, stood a small fishing village called Ban Koh. Life there followed the rhythm of the sea. Fishermen set out before dawn in wooden boats heavy with nets, returning at dusk with the day's catch. Women repaired nets, children played along the shore, and elders shared stories beneath the fading evening light. Everyone knew everyone. Families had lived there for generations. Their lives were intertwined like the roots of the mangrove trees along the coast. On the morning of March 14, 1970, 30 men prepared their boats as they had countless times before. The sky was clear, the sea was calm, there was no reason for concern. Among them were fathers, sons, brothers, and husbands. Some were seasoned fishermen with decades of experience at sea. Others were young men just beginning their lives. They laughed, they joked, they promised their families they would be home by nightfall. No one knew this journey would be the last for all 30 of them. The boats departed shortly after sunrise. Villagers watched as they disappeared beyond the horizon, a familiar, unremarkable sight. But by midday, dark clouds gathered in the sky at an unnatural speed. The wind grew stronger and the calm sea transformed into something violent and unpredictable. Villagers along the shore became uneasy. This was not a typical storm. It arrived without warning, sudden, fierce, as if the ocean itself had turned angry. As the afternoon passed, panic began to spread. The boats should have returned by now. Families gathered along the shoreline, eyes fixed on the horizon, praying to see the familiar shapes of wooden boats cutting through the waves. But the sea revealed nothing. When night fell, hope started to fade. Search parties were organized, but the storm made it impossible to go far. There was nothing left to do but wait and pray. 3 days later, debris began washing ashore. Broken wooden planks, torn fishing nets, a single sandal, a waterlogged hat, and then the bodies. One by one, they were pulled from the sea. The tide had carried them back to the village they had left behind. 30 men, 30 lives, 30 families shattered. A heavy silence settled over the village. Funeral fires burned for days. Mothers wailed along the shore. Children stood quietly, unable to understand why their fathers would never return. The village, once filled with laughter, became a place of unbearable grief. Years passed. The pain softened, but it never truly disappeared. Widows remarried. Children grew up without fathers. Life had to move forward, whether they were ready or not. Slowly, the village rebuilt itself, learning to live with what was missing. But then, something strange began to happen. Something no one could explain. In 1975, 5 years after the tragedy, a woman named Niran gave birth to a baby boy. She named him Somchai. From the moment Somchai began to speak, he showed an intense fear of water. Bath time was a struggle. He screamed, thrashed, his eyes wide with a fear far too deep for a child his age. His mother believed it was just a phase. She tried everything, but the fear never faded. By the time Somchai turned 3, nightmares began to haunt him. He would wake up crying, repeating the same words over and over. "The water is coming. I can't breathe. It's dark." Niran believed her son simply had an unusually vivid imagination. That belief shattered one day as they walked past the small village shrine where the names of the fishermen who drowned in the 1970 tragedy were engraved. Somchai suddenly stopped. He stared at one name. Then he pointed at it. "That's me," he said. Niran felt the blood drain from her face. The name Somchai was pointing to belonged to her late husband, who had died in the disaster years earlier. And Somchai was not alone. In the years that followed, more children were born in Ban Koh, and more of them began to display the same unexplainable behaviors. A young girl named Molly refused to go anywhere near the pier. When asked why, she answered simply, "I drowned there." A boy named Kamon woke up screaming in the middle of the night, reliving the moment a boat broke apart beneath him. He described in disturbing detail the sensation of water filling his lungs. Another child, Prasert, was able to describe the full layout of a fishing boat, including its mechanical structure, despite never having set foot on one. Parents were terrified. Some believed their children were possessed by spirits. Others feared they were being punished for unknown sins. But a few began to ask a far more unsettling question. What if the children were actually remembering the disaster? What if the souls of the drowned men had returned to the same village and even to the same families? Word of these strange events soon spread beyond Ban Koh. By 1980, the stories reached Dr. Jirapan Suwanachot, a Thai psychiatrist and researcher who had spent years studying claims of past life memories in children. He had investigated dozens of cases across Thailand, but nothing like this. If this was a case of mass reincarnation, it would be unprecedented. Dr. Suwanachot immediately traveled to Ban Koh. What he found there deeply unsettled him. Over the course of 2 years, he interviewed 12 children who claimed to remember the 1970 tragedy. These were not vague impressions or fantastical tales. The children provided concrete, verifiable details. One boy, Anirak, described the exact moment his boat capsized. He recalled the mast snapping first, followed by the vessel being violently thrown by the waves. Then he said the boat's hull split in 2. He even remembered the name of the man standing beside him, Wichai. As they sank, Anirak recalled grabbing Wichai's arm, trying not to let go. Dr. Suwanachot checked the records. Wichai had in fact drowned in the 1970 disaster, and he had been on the same boat Anirak described. Another child was a girl named Duanajai. She had a dark raised birthmark on her left shoulder, something her family said had been there since birth. When Dr. Suwanachot asked about it, Duangjai answered without hesitation. "When the boat broke, a piece of wood hit me there." The researcher dug deeper. He found an old survivor account describing how a fisherman had been struck on the left shoulder by debris before disappearing beneath the waves. That fisherman's name was Somkid. Duangjai claimed that in her previous life, she had been Somkid. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. One by one, the children provided details that matched historical records. They named other fishermen who had been on the boats. They described the weather, the time of day, and the moment the storm appeared out of nowhere, violent and sudden. Some children didn't just describe where the boats went down. They drew maps of the ocean floor, pointing to locations they had never visited. Yet those sketches matched the fishermen's charts. Others showed intense phobias that seemed irrational at first, until they were understood as the kind of trauma that can cling to memory long after an event ends. Dr. Suwanachot documented everything meticulously. He compared the children's statements with survivor testimony, family records, and the recollections of village elders who remembered the day of the tragedy. The consistency was undeniable. These children did not appear to be inventing stories. They weren't simply repeating tales they had heard. Many of them were born into families that rarely spoke about the disaster, families trying to move on and leave the past behind. And yet the children knew. They remembered. Still, one question remained. How? How could 12 children born years apart carry the memories of the same traumatic event? How could they describe people they had never met, boats they had never seen, and a day they had never lived so clearly? But how could these children describe moments that happened before they were even born? Dr. Sawanachot examined every possible explanation. One of the first was cryptomnesia, the unconscious recall of forgotten information. But this theory didn't hold up. Most of the children were under the age of 6 when they first began speaking about their past lives. They had not been exposed to detailed accounts of the disaster. There was no clear source from which such memories could have been absorbed and later recalled. The idea of false memory implantation was also ruled out. The originality of the children's accounts, the intense emotions they displayed while speaking, and, most strikingly, the presence of birthmarks corresponding to the injuries suffered by the drowned fishermen, all of this pointed to something far beyond simple psychological suggestion. Skeptics argued that the children must have overheard stories from adults, or that parents had unknowingly influenced them. But Dr. Sawanachot was meticulous. He interviewed parents separately, checked for inconsistencies, and even brought in independent researchers with no connection to the village. The results remained the same. These children knew things they should not have known. Then there were the emotional connections, the most difficult aspect to explain. Several children insisted on visiting specific families to whom they had no biological relation. A boy named Narong, born in 1978, repeatedly told his mother that he needed to see his other family. Eventually, she took him to the house he described. As soon as Narong walked inside, he ran toward an elderly woman, embraced her, and called her by name. She was the mother of a fisherman who had drowned in the 1970 tragedy. She had never met Narong before, but Narong recognized her. He knew her name, the layout of the house, and even where her late son's belongings were kept. Through tears, the woman said, "This is my son. I know it." These reunions were both heartbreaking and strangely beautiful. Families who had lost loved ones came face to face with children who seemed to carry fragments of those lost souls. Some believed, others struggled. Because how do you accept that your husband, your father, or your brother has returned, but not as the person you once knew, and not as your child, but as someone else's? How do you reconcile love with loss and hope with grief? Dr. Suwanachot spent 3 full years in Ban Koh. During that time, he carefully documented 12 cases, yet he believed the number was higher. Some families were afraid of being mocked, while in other children, the memories had not yet surfaced. According to him, many stories remained untold. In 1983, he published his findings, presenting the Ban Koh case as one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for reincarnation ever recorded. His work soon caught the attention of Dr. Ian Stevenson, the renowned psychiatrist from the University of Virginia who had dedicated his life to studying reincarnation cases. Stevenson traveled to Thailand to verify the findings himself. He interviewed the children personally, reviewed the documentation, and compared testimonies. His conclusion was unmistakable. These were genuine cases of past life memories. But what did all of this mean? For the families of Ban Koh, it meant hope. It suggested that death was not the end, that the men they had lost were not truly gone, that some part of them had found a way back. For the children, however, the experience was far more complex. As they grew older, some memories faded. Others lingered, carrying the weight of two lives at once. Some children never overcame their fear of the sea and refused to become fishermen. Others felt an inexplicable pull toward the water, as if something inside them still belonged there. The village itself began to change. What had once been a place of grief slowly became a place of wonder. Researchers, journalists, and curious visitors from around the world arrived to hear the stories. The children were studied, interviewed, and filmed. Some families welcomed the attention, seeing it as validation. Others withdrew, determined to protect their children from becoming spectacles. The village elders eventually built a new shrine, not only to honor the dead, but to acknowledge the mystery of what had occurred, the unexplained return of souls. As the years passed, the children grew into adults. Many remained in Ban Koh. They married, raised families of their own, and lived quiet lives, but they never truly forgot. Even as the memories softened and the details blurred, the sense of having lived before and the feeling that the sea held a deeper connection than this single lifetime never fully disappeared. They grew up carrying the feeling of having deeply known another life before this one. Some became outspoken advocates of reincarnation, speaking at conferences and openly sharing their experiences. Others chose silence, deciding to live alongside the mystery, accepting that not everything needs an explanation. Dr. Suwana Chot's research remains one of the most significant contributions to the study of reincarnation. What makes the Ban Koh case truly unique is that it is not just about individual past life memories. It is about a collective experience, a shared trauma that transcended death and reemerged in a new generation. The case raises profound questions about the nature of consciousness, whether memory can exist independently of the brain, and what it truly means to be human. For believers, Ban Koh is evidence that the soul survives. For skeptics, it is a fascinating psychological phenomenon, perhaps a collective coping mechanism used by a grieving community to process unbearable loss. But for the people of Ban Koh, it is neither proof nor theory. It is simply life. Their sons and daughters, neighbors and friends carry within them echoes of those who came before. And the sea continues to rise and fall. Fishermen still head out at dawn, but now they pray not only for safety, but in gratitude for lives that returned. Children who once spoke of drowning now watch their own children play along the shore. Memories may fade, but truth remains. In a small village in southern Thailand, 30 souls returned to the same waters, the same families, the same land. They came back to finish what was left undone, to live the lives stolen by the storm. This is the story of Ban Koh, a story of love that defied death, of memory that transcended time, and of a community that learned to accept the impossible as real. Whether you believe in reincarnation or not does not change the facts. The children knew things they should not have known. They remembered lives they never lived, and by doing so, they gave hope to a village that had lost everything. Because perhaps reincarnation is exactly this, not a religion, not a scientific theory, but a form of hope. Hope that nothing is ever truly lost. Hope that those we love may one day return to us. and hope that life in all its mystery is far stranger and far more beautiful than we ever imagined.